Hello and welcome to another edition of the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor, and we are continuing our look at CONCACAF World Cup qualifying. So we are previewing all 8 teams in separate podcasts, doing 2 for each team, actually. This first one focuses on the team, its history, and prospects, with a special emphasis on qualifying history. And in a separate podcast, we will look at the players, which, although somewhat artificially, we have organized by position, with a look at the main candidates for each position.
All right, and we are considering an update podcast about halfway through the tournament, or not tournament, but qualification. So keep your eye out for that. And around Christmas time probably is when we would do that. And Connor, I don't have a Panama shirt, but I am wearing the colors with this bright red shirt. And then I got the Cardiff scarf, which has the Panama's colors in it. Just a great way for me to squeeze this Cardiff scarf into the podcast.
Very nice. Yes, we are looking at Panama today. Between your red and my blue, I think we've got it covered.
Great. You have a little white there too. Okay, well, this is the way we're organizing these team previews. So we begin with kind of an intro of the country itself, but then the history will focus on soccer history, of course. An overview of their participation and achievements, then a look at their World Cup history. This time we're putting special emphasis on World Cup qualifying history because that's what they're in. But we'll also take an overview of the Regional Cup. And then in part 2, we'll look at their recent situation. So their 2022 World Cup qualifying, if they've had any games to this point, their final round schedule, and then a quick overview of their players. And then in the last part, we look at their prospects, their rankings, their head-to-head with the other teams in the group, and finally a discussion of how we think they're going to do. So let us start with part 1, and that begins with kind of an overview of the country by Connor.
Right. So Panama is a medium-sized country in Central America. They're actually 4th largest of 7, so right in the middle. And they're the 5th largest country by area or size, competing in the OCA. In terms of population, at 4.3 million, they're also the 5th largest out of 8. They're actually the smallest country in Central America, other than tiny Belize, which has just under 400,000 people. So 4.3 million, much larger than that, but on the smaller end of Central American countries.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks for that. And let's start looking at their soccer team itself. Do we have a nickname for these guys?
We do. Panama is also known as Los Canaleros, or the Canal Men, an obvious reference to the Panama Canal, or La Marea Roja, which is the Red Tide.
Great. And I'm not sure I've heard them referred to by those names. Have you?
Definitely Canaleros, I have heard. Red Tide,
Okay.
not so much.
All right. Well, we'll take a look at their tournament participation and overview of their major achievements first. They first entered World Cup qualification in 1978, much later than most teams in the Central American region, but they have participated consistently since then. They entered the regional tournament, the CONCACAF Championship, much earlier in 1963, so I'm not really sure why they were so late in getting to the World Cup. Their participation in the region was patchy until 1977, from which time they entered consistently. They're also part of the Central American zone, as opposed to, say, the Caribbean zone or the North American zone. And that zone had a tournament called the UNCAF Nations Cup, which acted as a qualifier for the Gold Cup until recently. Finally, they participated in the 2016 Copa America Centenario, the 100-year celebration of South American, the South American Copa America. And in that tournament, they were knocked out in the first round, although it did have to be qualified for, so they did qualify for it but then were knocked out fairly quickly. After steady improvement, particularly from 2005 onwards, they earned their first World Cup qualification in 2018. At the regional level, they earned 2 second-place finishes, one in 2005 and the other in 2013. And finally, at the Central American zone, they won the CONCACAF Nations Cup once in its 14 editions, taking the title in 2009.
That's a great summary.
Thank you.
In terms of World Cup history, Panama were quite weak in the 80s and 90s, and it took until 2006 to reach the final round of qualifying. They finished last there with just 2 points. 2010 was actually a step back when they unluckily dropped out early because they were misseeded, losing to El Salvador in round 2 of 4. We will examine their performance in more detail a bit later on for the 2014 and 2018 editions.
Okay, and I think I gave some wrong information. It's not really they who were misseeded, but the team they played. But we're going to cover that in the next section where we cover their World Cup qualifying in more detail. So again, why they first entered in 1978 is a bit of a mystery, given that they were involved in regional games much earlier than that. But they got off to a good start in their first qualification run with a win over El Salvador and a win over Costa Rica and a tie with El Salvador. But then they lost all games after that to finish last, Guatemala taking first place in that group. In 1982, their next entry, they earned only a single draw with Costa Rica over 8 games and finished last in the group. The next 3 tournaments saw them knocked out in round 1 of 3, although they did show slight improvement as things progressed. They lost both games to Honduras in 1986. They lost to Costa Rica in 1990, but they did manage to tie away in the away game. And in 1994, they won the first game at home to Costa Rica, but then they lost the second game 5-1. So once again, failed to pass round 1 of 3. 1998 saw them in a group again, but though they were undefeated at home against Canada, El Salvador, and Cuba, they lost all on the road and finished 3rd. They were knocked out in the semi-final round in 2002 also, earning just a home draw with Canada over their 6 games. In 2005, they had surprised in the Gold Cup, going undefeated to the final, and the improvement showed in their 2006 World Cup qualification campaign. In 2006, there in the semi-final round, they took points off all 3 teams to finish second behind the USA and ahead of Jamaica and El Salvador to reach the final round for the first time. But they were out of their depth once there, earning draws in their first 2 home games, including against Mexico, but then losing all other 8 games to finish last. The progress they were showing at the regional level, they reached the quarterfinals of the 2007 and 2009 Gold Cups, and progress at the local level, coming second in the 2007 CONCACAF Nations Cup and winning it in 2009. That didn't show in their 2010 World Cup qualification. That was because they were unlucky in drawing the strongest of the teams slated to play that round, El Salvador, who was actually misseeded and probably shouldn't have been in that round. One of the many complaints we have about FIFA rankings being used, actually. In a dramatic set where they took 3 red cards over the 2 games, El Salvador scored the goal they needed to advance at 88 minutes into the second game, so just fell short there. It would have to wait until 2014 to see if they could show their progress on the world stage. So let's see how they fared from 2014 with a close look at their 2 last World Cup campaigns.
So Panama got a bye in round 1 of 4, which was a preliminary round in 2014. They were the strongest team in round 2 of 4, as all teams ranked above them received a bye to the next round. It showed, too, as they easily won all games against the weak competition of Nicaragua and Dominica. Round 3 ended with them a second out of 4 in a competitive group, where the top 3 teams finished within a point of each other, those other teams being Honduras and Canada. So with that second place finish, they advanced to the final round, the Hex, and it ended in heartbreak as they were minutes from finishing ahead of a really ghastly Mexico for the Intercontinental playoff spot. 2 injury time goals in their last game with the United States knocked them out. That said, they were hardly deserving of a World Cup, having only won 1 of their 10 games in the Hex, drawing 5 and losing 4. But they did come close to just pipping Mexico at the end.
Wow. Okay, how about 2018?
So in 2018, they were one of the top 6 ranked teams in CONCACAF. So they received a bye straight through to round 4 of 5, which was a group stage. Despite losing both games to Costa Rica, they finished comfortably ahead of Haiti and Jamaica, suffering only a draw in Haiti, and thus advancing to the Hex once again. There, Panama were undefeated at home and bested Costa Rica and Honduras to take the last automatic spot and reach their first ever World Cup. A home win over Honduras in the last game was one of several results that conspired to knock the USA out of the World Cup. They finished 5th.
I think that home win was over Costa Rica.
Oh, okay, Costa Rica. Yeah, my bad.
No problem.
Once at the World Cup, they did not really expect much in the tournament, and they ended up losing all 3 games to finish last in the group. They didn't score against Belgium, but a goal against England meant more than the 6 scored against them, was a big cause for celebration. Another goal against Tunisia in a 2-1 defeat meant that all teams in the World Cup scored at least twice, although their 11 goals conceded put them in last place in the tournament.
Oh, well, the one who scored that goal against England was Philippe Baloy, who is, I think, pretty much a retired player who they brought back just for the glory of the World Cup. So there was a lot of celebration about that.
Yeah, great story.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on. Thanks, Connor. That was a good overview. And we'll move on to look at the Gold Cup history in brief. So their progress has been more evident and actually quite dramatic in regional tournaments. Before 2005, they had only qualified in 1963 and 1993, failing to pass the group stage both times. Since 2005, however, they've qualified for every Gold Cup, and they shocked in 2005, coming second, and reached at least the quarterfinal regularly after that. Second place again in 2013 may be a bit flattering. That's because most of the rivals sent kind of weak teams, B teams, to the tournament. But following up with third place in 2015 put them firmly among the second-tier teams. A quarterfinal finish in 2017 suggests being one of the 8 strongest teams in the region. So let's see if they kept that up over the last 2 tournaments, which we'll look a bit more closely at.
So in 2019, Panama qualified automatically because they were competing in the Hex at the time. So all those teams received automatic qualification to the Gold Cup. At the tournament, they beat a poor Trinidad and Tobago as well as Guyana to guarantee advancement after 2 games. So along with the United States, they fielded a B team for their last game, which they lost to finish second in the group. They did advance to the quarterfinals, but there they lost 1-0 to Jamaica.
Okay, so that's a standard finish for them in the quarterfinals. Let's see how they did in 2021.
So in 2021, Panama qualified through the Nations League. That was a 3-team group with Mexico and Bermuda. And despite a 4-1 win over Bermuda 3 days earlier, they lost 2-0 at home to Bermuda.
Whoa.
Yeah, big shock. And then also lost both games to Mexico in their League A. However, with a record of just 1 win and 3 losses, they still managed to finish second in the group on goal differential and qualified directly for the Cup. Their tournament started with a thrilling game against Qatar, where they came from behind 3 times to earn a 3-3 draw, really against superior opposition. They deserved a better result against Honduras, but lost what was also an entertaining game, 3-2. And then a win over Grenada in their last game was not enough to avoid third place in the group stage. This would be the first time they failed to pass the group stage since 2003.
Yeah, well, most other teams had a fairly weak team in the 4th position. Qatar was basically viewed as the 4th team being added. The other groups had teams that had to get in through a playoff, so they were kind of weak. So a bit unfortunate there. I wouldn't hold it against them for not passing the group stage with Qatar in the group.
Yeah, I agree with that. On balance, the strongest of all 4 groups overall.
Yeah. Okay, well, before we move on, we'll take a bit of a look at the CONCACAF Nations Cup. It's kind of passé now because that CONCACAF Nations Cup has been replaced by CONCACAF Champions League. But it still gives us an idea of how they kind of rate in the Central American region. So their CONCACAF record reflected roughly the same pattern as the Gold Cup, including the flash of success in 1993, where they finished 3rd. Apart from that, they languished in 4th or lower in this 7-team zone. Since 2007, though, they finished 3rd or higher, and they even won it in 2009. 2013 seems a poor result, finishing 5th. But as in the 2010 World Cup qualification, a close analysis reveals that they were more unlucky rather than it being a sign of regression. This was set right by a 3rd place finish in 2014, and then a 2nd place finish in the final edition in 2017, which they hosted. So that tournament is now defunct. And let's just finish with a little summary of Panama. I think you're up there, Connor.
Sure. So 2005 marked a turning point for them from being an inferior team in the region to being a competitive one. Qualifying for the 2018 World Cup was a fitting conclusion to their steady progress, and actually was a bit of a reward for a strong generation who kind of took them from 2005 onwards, and many of whom retired after the 2018 World Cup. The question of whether they can maintain that strength is kind of up in the air and has not really been satisfactorily answered yet.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at some of their players, but actually some of their veterans who I expected to retire in 2018 didn't. They remain. But they nevertheless will need an infusion of younger talent. The squad that reached the World Cup was a bit of a golden generation, and that'll be hard to live up to. Likely another World Cup qualification is a bit too ambitious unless the tournament expands. A quarterfinal finish in the 2019 was a slight step back, and definitely struggling with Bermuda, as you pointed out, in the 2019 and 20 CONCACAF Nations League was not a good sign of things to come. As we said, their exit at the group stage in 2021 doesn't really seem a sign of weakening. They were just kind of unlucky to have Qatar in the group. But they did make this final round of World Cup qualifying, which was aided by some of the veterans who will soon retire. So the question of whether they're finding new talent still seems a bit up in the air. And we're going to look at players a little bit later, but right now we're going to look at how they've fared in World Cup qualifying so far.
Right, so Panama was one of 3 teams that did actually have to qualify for the Hex. The other 5 teams kind of just being placed there automatically. So we do have a bit of World Cup qualifying games to look at. So in the first round, they were in a group of 5, but they won they won all 4 games against Barbados, Dominica, Anguilla, and Dominican Republic. So a group they would have been expected to win. And then in the next round, they faced a home and away against Curacao. Curacao actually a pretty decent team in the region, so a kind of a tricky looking tie. But Panama won 2-1 in the home leg and managed a 0-0 draw in the second leg. So that was enough for them to advance to the Hex.
Right. Great. Now we'll take a look at their final round schedule. And I see they start with 3 out of 5 home games and they finish with 3 out of 4 home games. So a lot of games in the middle are played away, including Canada in October. Do you have anything to say here, Connor?
Yeah, the weather might not be great, so that will be probably a difficult game for them. Playing in much cooler conditions than they're used to. In terms of their schedule, I think starting at home and ending at home is probably the way you'd want it. You'd want to get off to a good start, and you'd want to be able to rely on your home games at the end to kind of finish strong or pick up some points when you really need it. Mm-hmm. Those home games that they end with are against Jamaica, Honduras, and Canada. So those are all games that they'll have to look at, probably getting 7 or even 9 points from those games. They are winnable for them being at home. So I think those would be, if they can stay competitive through a difficult spell, kind of in November and January when they are on the road, their schedule does give them an opportunity to kind of pick up those points at the end when they might most need them.
Yeah, so I suppose they'll be hoping to go into October, toward the top of the table, having picked up some early points, because 4 out of their 5 games are on the road from October to November. So they probably won't be expecting too many points there. As you said, then picking up some points at the end of the campaign. Okay, shall we move on to players?
Yeah.
All right. Do you wanna take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, we first just have a list of some players kind of from this golden generation of Panama football, which we mentioned, kind of 2005 to at least the 2018 World Cup, possibly further, but I think that's yet to be determined. Some of the names that we know retired are Jaime Pinedo, their goalkeeper, Gabriel Gomez, Blas Perez, who's one of their all-time leading goal scorers, Philippe Beloy, and Luis Tejada. Another one who retired was Roman Torres. He seemed to play a little bit longer, playing in the 2019 Gold Cup, but another one of their big names, and I believe they're captain for them. So it's a lot of names who've retired in the last couple of years.
Yeah, but the fact is we were expecting more to retire. Names like Gabriel Torres and Armando Cooper, who we see in the list below. But they're hanging on and will probably be playing in this qualification anyway.
Yeah, a couple other names that will be key for them. One is Rolando Blackburn. He scored goals in 2021 Gold Cup qualifying and 2021 Gold Cup. He got 2. Eric Davis and Jose Rodriguez are a couple others who scored 2 goals in the Gold Cup. And then looking at their goal scorers so far in 2022 World Cup play, Gabriel Torres leads the way with 4. I believe all 4 coming in the win against Anguilla. Cecilio Waterman, Armando Cooper is on the list. Alberto Quintero, another one who's been around for a little while. And then a couple other players with 1 goal to their name.
Yeah, so a lot of these players are kind of in and about. I think in defense and midfield, they kind of have steady players. Eric Davis is actually a defender, and for some reason they've given him penalties. So I think all of his international goals have been recent and on penalties. Those guys are all established in the team. Meanwhile, the forward line is kind of shifting around a bit. Gabriel Torres is kind of the main guy, but he's aging. And then players like Fajardo and Waterman and stuff seem to be kind of a little bit in and out of the team, as they haven't really settled on an upfront pair. They play with a pair sometimes and then just a single forward sometimes. But yeah, that seems a bit undecided. Okay, but we definitely will take a closer look at that team in the player file. So let's move on to part 3 of the podcast, which is the prospects for Panama. And we'll start with their FIFA rankings, with their FIFA ELO rankings.
Yeah, so in FIFA and ELO, they're 74th and 73rd respectively. So there seems to be kind of general agreement between the two systems. In terms of where they rank in the 8 teams in the Hex, FIFA has them as 7th overall and ELO as 8th. So definitely near the bottom end of teams kind of in the Hex, which could suggest that they may be near the bottom of the group, as opposed to really competing for the World Cup spot. But we'll discuss that later. They have been higher in both systems, especially around the time of the 2018 World Cup, where they were 55th in FIFA and 67th in ELO. They were 48th in ELO not long before that. So they slipped a little bit to the low 80s from their heights from a couple of years ago, which kind of goes with our thesis that they may be kind of weakening overall.
Yeah, I mean, generally they finish in the quarterfinals. That's kind of consistent with the 7th and 8th rankings there. Interestingly, they did actually move up about 7 points in each system, despite not passing the group stage. I think a tie with Qatar was probably not bad for their record, because Qatar is a higher ranked team.
All right, do you want to take us through the head-to-head records?
You betcha. Okay, so we'll start with Canada. They have a losing record to Canada, but it's fairly close. They have 1 win, 4 draws, and 3 losses. So they tied in the 2013 Gold Cup group stage. And in the 2014 World Cup qualifying, they lost away but won at home. So they haven't played, they haven't played since then. And I think we can generally see their record as quite even, at least. Panama versus Costa Rica is 6 wins, 5 losses, and 17 draws. And one might think that a lot of their wins came in recent years, and generally that's true, but in very recent years it's not. They lost in the 2017 Gold Cup quarterfinal to Costa Rica, and then they lost both games in the 2018 World Cup qualifying, despite actually making it through. They lost both games in round 4 of 5 in the semi-final round. The reason they made it through partly is because they did better in the final round with a win at home and a draw away. So that is the last time these two met. Panama versus Honduras, they also have a losing record with 8 wins, 7 draws, and 15 losses. In recent competition, they tied in the 2015 Gold Cup group stage. They were bested by Honduras. No, they bested Honduras in 2018 World Cup qualifying, winning 1-0 away, but then tying 1-1 at home. And finally, they just met in the 2021 Gold Cup, where they lost an exciting game to Honduras 3-2. But an interesting detail here is that before the year 2000, the record was 1 win, 0 draws, and 10 losses. But after 2000, it's 7 wins, 7 draws, and 5 losses. So for the past 20 years, they've actually had a better record over Honduras. Okay, moving on to Jamaica. They have a better record than Jamaica, but pretty even, with 3 wins, 5 draws, and 2 losses. In the 2018 World Cup qualifying, semi-final round, they won 2-0 and 3-0. So both legs. And in 2019 Gold Cup quarterfinal, we saw that they lost in that quarterfinal 1-0 to Jamaica. So a pretty even record there. As one might guess, they have a losing record to Mexico, but it's not as big as I expected. It's 2 wins, 3 draws, and 8 losses. However, in recent times, they've lost their last 3. So in the 2015 Gold Cup semi-final, they lost in extra time. Mexico scoring the extra time winner there. And then in 2021 Gold Cup qualifying in that CONCACAF Nations League group, they lost twice to Mexico, as Connor pointed out. So 2 wins, 3 draws, and 8 losses. With the USA, it is a losing record, and actually fairly profoundly losing. It's 2 wins, 4 draws, and 13 losses. So one of their losses was in the 2013 Gold Cup final, where they lost 1-0. In the 2017 Gold Cup group stage, they tied the USA. And in 2018 World Cup qualifying, they tied at home but lost away. And their last meeting was in 2019 Gold Cup group stage, where they lost 1-0 in that round. So maybe you can take us through a bit of a summary, Connor, with Panama's record against other teams in the groups.
Yeah, so the only team Panama has a winning record against is Jamaica, and that, not strongly, fairly close, with 3 wins for Panama, 2 wins for Jamaica, and 5 draws. They have a losing record against everyone else in the group, though they have been competitive with Canada and Honduras, relatively close, but stronger losing records against Costa Rica, Mexico, and the United States. So they will have their work cut out for them, certainly in the Hex.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. I was hoping you'd keep it going a bit longer, because I realized I forgot to include Costa Rica.
Or El Salvador.
El Salvador there. So I'll just bring it up here and quickly add that.
But as we saw most obviously with the case of Honduras, where Panama had a very poor record, just 1 win prior to 2000 and then 7 wins since 2000. A lot of that tracks with their history, where, as we said, they were kind of a weak team, up until about 2005. So their records against some of the teams has improved. That's also the case against Costa Rica, where they've been a bit better in the last kind of 15, 20 years. Even the United States, they've only lost 2 of their last 6 games against the United States, winning 1 and tying 3. So, so Panama, like I said, that tracks with their kind of steady improvement over recent years. So they've, kind of shifted the balance in their favor against some of these teams, though, given how long they were weak, they still have losing records to most of them.
Yeah, that's right. And that's well illustrated with their record against El Salvador, because it's 8 wins, 6 draws, and 9 losses. So overall, actually pretty even. But you can see El Salvador has the better of them. But interestingly, before 2005, it was 0 wins, 5 draws, and 7 losses. And after 2005, it was 8 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses. That's pretty interesting, hey?
Yeah, an incredible turnaround. And El Salvador maybe becoming a bit weaker team there. But yeah, the long view is illustrative. But for Panama, you really have to kind of divide their history into kind of 2 separate periods.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, and they haven't actually met El Salvador outside of the CONCACAF Nations Cup since 2011. But even then, in 2011, they beat them in the quarterfinals. So you could almost say that they have a superior record to El Salvador. And actually, that brings us into our discussion because I think until now we've both kind of put Panama and El Salvador at the bottom of the group, and this would suggest that Panama could finish seventh over El Salvador. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree overall that they will likely finish in the bottom of the group. I think kind of reflective of their overall FIFA and ELO rankings. Um, Even though they qualified for the last World Cup in 2018, they've lost some key players without a doubt there. I don't really see Panama being competitive for that last for the third place spot. I say final spot, just assuming that US and Mexico will finish 1-2 as they sometimes do, I should say, not all the time. But I don't really see them competing as much with Costa Rica, Canada, and Honduras, or even Jamaica over the course of 14 games. They're capable of pulling results, but I don't think they can launch a sustained campaign, even with a good start and perhaps a good finish.
Yeah, I agree. I think, even psychologically, I think, reaching the World Cup was kind of a pinnacle. And you don't get the vibe from them that they're like, okay, we're here now, we're going to reach it regularly now. It's more the vibe like, oh, we've done it. Our golden generation is retiring, and hopefully we can build another golden generation to do it in the future. But I don't think they really have the expectation here to be reaching the World Cup again.
Yeah, what do you think would be realistic for them in the Hex? What do you think their ambition is?
Well, my opinion is changing a little bit over the course of doing these podcasts. And we've seen that Honduras and Costa Rica both have aging squads, just as Panama does. I feel like Panama has done a little bit more to kind of bring in players behind these guys. Probably not enough because the schedule is so thick. That some of the older players are going to struggle. There will probably be injuries. You said in our last podcast, though, that one advantage may be teams that have a lot of players playing locally, or I guess Panama has a lot in the USA, but that's not that's a bit of a different situation than players traveling over from Europe. So I think they have a couple of small advantages in their favor, but I think still relying on those veterans is a bit of a problem. How about you? What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, Panama will certainly want to be ambitious and at least try and get the intercontinental playoff spot, but I think it's a bit out of reach. I think some signs of their weakening have included that loss to Honduras in the Gold Cup. Although it was competitive, Honduras is a team that they'll need to get the better of in World Cup qualifying, and that loss shows they may not be able to do it. And as well, the loss to Bermuda was a real setback for them in the CONCACAF Nations League, and yeah, perhaps a sign of a team that's on the a bit of a downswing. They have some good players. And I agree that, having some players based domestically in Panama will, could be a benefit because there's just less travel involved and less risk of COVID coming from all over the world. But individually, I don't think their players are quite good enough compared to some of the other teams. And as a team, the recent results don't show to me that they can be strong enough to be competitive, like I said, especially over the course of 14 games.
Yeah, but I'm going to make a prediction to say that I think their final points total will be in the double digits, and I think them and El Salvador are both capable of that, which will make it a very competitive group. There are no minnows to be slaughtered in this group.
I agree with that, certainly, and I don't think teams will relish their games, especially going into Panama. I don't think any points will be taken for granted.
Right. Well, Connor, I got to say, I'm a little tired of hearing you beat around the bush. I'm wondering if you can tell me straight, are they going to finish ahead of El Salvador or not?
They will finish ahead of El Salvador, but I don't think anyone else. I see them finishing seventh in the group. They could be competitive with Jamaica and Honduras, who I think will be ahead of them. But push come to shove, seventh is where I see them finishing.
I got to agree with you there. I think they are a little bit stronger than El Salvador. I was actually surprised when we looked at the record for El Salvador. So I'm glad we managed to include that at the end, because it was a bit surprising that it was so one-sided in favor of El Salvador. So I'm going to say a solid seventh. Of course, there's always room for surprises and movement, but based on what we've seen, seventh seems a sensible prediction.
All right. Well, we agree then. No need for fisticuffs or anything like that.
Okay, well, it's been great talking to you about this. Thanks very much. And I will see you in our next podcast when we do our final team, Mexico.
I will see you then. Looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you, Connor.